My name is Benjamin Hagwood, and today I would like to talk to you about a very important issue, voting. But not just voting for voting's sake, but that you should be an informed voter. Today we face a very polarized economy, where we have two sides that are diametrically opposed. And it's the responsibility of citizens, of American citizens, to go out and cast their vote, but not simply because they think they're towing the party line or they're following what the media wants us to do, but instead they vote because they are informed and they feel like they're making a decision that best helps both the nation and individuals as a whole. Now, before I get started today, I would like to give you a brief preview of the information I'll be going over. First and foremost is we'll look at the historical context of voting, the way that it's been affected in the past. We'll look at the modern day significance of voting. We'll look at the way minorities should vote. We'll look at voting, how it's not enough just to vote, but that you need to be informed, and then I'll share some closing thoughts. The historical context of voting has showed us that from the very beginning, voting was limited to certain groups of individuals, generally European descended males that owned land. Shortly after, voting was extended to other males of other races that included blacks, Asians, and Hispanics. We see that voting itself stood as a definitive right that was pursued. It was something that individuals felt that once they got that right, they became a citizen, which only stands to bear that you viewing yourself as a citizen or viewing yourself as equal now would indicate that voting helps to support that claim and should be something that we pursue. Voting also helped to craft the national perception that we had because serious topics arose. Similarly today, we have topics that we are currently faced with that we have to figure out the way that we want to be perceived, the way that we want to engage those arguments, and the way that we want to look at what those the issues actually are and the way we want to vote for them. Now, just like there is historical significance to voting about when people could or could not vote, because women and minorities received the rights to vote drastically after European males or European descendants who owned land received rights to vote, we see that there are also modern day significances. The first one is that the modern day significance to voting is the typical blame game that we see. As I stated earlier, voting has become very polarized. Politics has taken the route of blaming one competitor over the other. The Obama campaign as well as the Romney campaign both administrators this to us, which means that we should make sure that we do not participate in things like picking your side and defending a type of tactic, which is what they already do. If you remember back before this actual portion of the speech started, the PowerPoint slide shows that we have two drastic elements. We have the existence of the elephant and the existence of the donkey. These two caricatures kind of point to us kind of the way that we are polarized our politics in the status quo, and what we need to do instead is engage in an ethic that helps us to reconnect us with the foundations of ethics and morals as it existed in things such as the Constitution. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, what is this speech significance to me? Well, for minorities, voting is important because first and foremost, it's key to maintain the perspective of minorities. A lot of times the reason that we're categorically called minorities is because we do not represent a large portion of the population that exists in America. It's our responsibility to make sure that we help maintain the perspective that we have for our special interest groups, as well as other special interest groups that exist. Also, it's important to understand that minorities are a very large, important demographic group. Their presence at the polls is critical, and their input and their understanding of the way that things work is important because they affect not only you, but everyone else. The most important part that I can give to you as minorities is that as a minority, whether that is because of your race, because of your class, because of your gender, you have to realize that you voting and you being informed to vote is critical to validating the past actions of individuals that have sacrificed so much so that you could have the opportunity to vote, so that you would be afforded that opportunity. When you don't take the time to vote, or even if you take the time to vote but you're not informed, you are sullying that entire movement. You're sullying those memories of those individuals, and you're sullying all the things they fought for in the past. That's why I stand before you to say that voting is not enough. you need to be informed. You need to know the issues. You need to understand that Obamacare is not Obamacare. It is the Affordable Care Act. You need to understand that Mitt Romney may have passed something similar, but it's not on such a grand stage. You need to understand that Paul Ryan may have wanted to make cuts when he was on a smaller stage, but would not push for such things if he's vice president. You need to understand that Joe Biden sometimes says things that forces the hand of the president. But all of these things do not shape us, right? We need to know all the issues. You need to know about your stance on abortion. You need to know your stance on the economy. You need to know your stance on what you think the military should do. You need to know your stance on foreign affairs. All of these things should help mold the way that you cast your vote, because the election is very important. See, the media's coverage on it is not enough, because we tend to go to whichever media we already have a predisposition for, which means that if you see yourself leaning conservatively, you'll watch Fox News. If you see yourself leaning liberally, you'll watch CNN. But what about taking a view from both of them, and then sometimes looking for outside resources? These are things we have to do in order to make sure that we stay engaged and we're knowledgeable of the information, because generally, each side presents one side of the story. And since there's multiple sides of stories that exist when we're talking about politics, we should be engaged in viewing every single side of that story in order to make sure that we're the most informed that we could be. There's an old saying that my grandmother used to say to me all the time, that if you wanted to hide information from someone, you put it in a book, because lots of people don't read. We depend on the media now, we depend on vast information to give us what we think we need to know. This is not always enough. We need to make sure that we engage in an ethic that's better for us to be informed citizens, as well as better for us to be able to learn from each other about things such as voting. Being an informed citizen also has a second part that's also very important, is that we have the power as citizens to put people in office and to take them out of office, which means that we should be communicating with them. If we don't know the issues before they get into office, there's no way we'll be concerned about the issues when they get in office, or their ability to uphold issues that they promised when they were trying to get into office. Which is why it's so very important that we step back and we learn the issues, we understand what exactly they're saying they can and cannot do, and then we engage them on their level. In this short time, I've taken the time to look at the historical context of voting. And we talked about how initially, not everyone could vote. Then we allowed some people to vote and still had barriers in place, things like the poll tax. Then we removed barriers to allow all people to vote. Then we looked at the modern day significance of voting. Things such as being able to understand that voting is key to be able to move us away from the typical blame game that takes place in voting polls and in voting districts. After we looked at reasons why minorities specifically should think about voting, and why they should not just vote, but be an informed voter. With that being said, I would like to leave you with this. In 1905, W.E.B. Du Bois stated that voting in and of itself was a very asinine activity. It was something that he would not participate in because similar rights were not afforded to individuals that he saw as himself, to African Americans, to minorities, to women. And a nation could not be a democratic nation unless it took the time to understand that the inclusivity of all its people, no matter what their race, their creed, their gender, all of these things needs to be included into the voting populace. And then we would have a true vision of what the American people wanted. In 2008, we witnessed the historic election of Barack Hussein Obama. Polls showed that never before had there been such a massive turnout of voters, not just any voters, but minority voters, race, class, young, old. Since then, we have realized the polarizing effect of the political arena. We've seen political manipulation, we've seen material consumption, and we've seen ideological grandstanding. The United States has never been so polarized as it was since the Civil War. The attack ads and distasteful tactics deployed by political candidates create a support, a certain sense of intimidation, and aid in perpetual misinformation of the American populace. So the question is, what do we do next? What is it that we as voters, what is it that we are responsible for in order to ensure that this does not continue? How do we prevent such a dangerous political climate? I stand before you today to say that simply exercising your right to vote is not enough. You have to be informed. An informed voter is drastically different from just any voter. An informed voter interrogates the areas of not just their political, social, and economic interests, but they evaluate all areas. An informed voter doesn't simply toe the party line, but instead they constantly question candidates and their intentions. Being an informed citizen is critical to a deliberative democracy. That is, it is critical to a nation that is open enough to listen to the respondents of its people, to take into consideration what they want, and to be accountable for the actions they take, whether it is for their citizens or against their citizens. And that is why